Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul after death? Not in theory, not in theology books, but what actually happens. And have you ever considered that some souls might be so desperate for help that they would cross back from the other side, visible, speaking, begging for prayers? In 1944, on a winter night at the Capuchin Friary of Our Lady of Grace in San Giovanni Rotondo, Italy, the friars heard something impossible. Voices, loud voices, shouting from downstairs in the dark. The words were clear: "Viva Padre Pio, viva Padre Pio." Over and over, Padre Raffaele da Sant'Elia a Pianisi, the superior, was not a man who entertained nonsense. He heard the noise. He walked to the door of his cell and called out for Fra Gerardo da Deliceto, the doorkeeper. "Go downstairs," he ordered. "Let those people out. Lock the door properly this time." Fra Gerardo went down. The staircase was dark. He reached the entrance. He checked the lock. It was double-bolted, exactly as he had left it hours before. He pushed the door open and stepped outside into the cold. Nobody. Not a single person. Not even footprints in the frost. He went back upstairs and reported to Padre Raffaele. The door was locked. Nobody there. Nobody left. Nobody could have gotten in. Padre Raffaele was puzzled. He walked straight to Padre Pio's cell and knocked. Padre Pio opened the door. His face was calm. His eyes were tired but clear. Padre Raffaele asked him directly, "Do you know what that was downstairs? The voices? The shouting?" Padre Pio smiled. "Just a little." "Oh," he said, "those were soldiers who had died on the battleground. They came to thank me for my prayers for their salvation." And then he added something that would be repeated for decades. "There are more souls of the dead coming up that road to ask for my prayers than souls of the living. If you value documented stories of the saints and their supernatural encounters like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you are hearing this from." This script is researched and factual, using sources from Bernard Ruffin's comprehensive biography, Padre Pio, the true story, published by Our Sunday Visitor, which draws on direct testimony from the friars who lived with Padre Pio, alongside historical records from the town registry of San Giovanni Rotondo and documented accounts from American soldiers stationed in Foggia during World War II. These are not legends. These are recorded events with dates, names, and witnesses who signed their testimonies. Now back to the information. The friars did not panic. They had seen this before, not the voices at midnight, but they had seen Padre Pio speak to empty air, open doors to no one, stop mid-sentence to address someone invisible. The first time, most of them witnessed it, they thought he was losing his mind. The second time, they began to understand. Padre Pio saw souls, not metaphorically, not in visions during prayer. He saw them the way you see a person standing in front of you. He spoke to them. They spoke back. And almost always, they wanted the same thing. A mass. One mass. Just one. That was the key to their release. The most famous encounter happened years earlier, in 1917. Padre Pio was sitting alone in the guest room of the friary on a winter afternoon. It had snowed heavily. The fire in the fireplace was crackling. The room was warm. He was absorbed in prayer when an old man sat down beside him. Padre Pio looked up. The man was wearing a black cloak, the old-fashioned kind that southern Italian peasants still wore at the time. Padre Pio was startled. He could not imagine how the man had entered the friary at this time of night. Every door was locked. He had heard no footsteps, no knock. Nothing. He questioned the man directly. "Who are you? What do you want?" The old man looked at him and answered in a calm voice. "Padre Pio, I am Pietro di Mauro, son of Nicola, nicknamed Prococo. I died in this friary on the 18th of September, 1908, in cell number 4, when it was still a poorhouse. One night, while in bed, I fell asleep with a lighted cigar. The mattress caught fire and I died a terrible death. I am still in purgatory. I need a holy mass in order to be freed. God permitted that I come and ask you for help." Padre Pio listened. His heart was pounding, but his face remained still. He replied, "Rest assured that tomorrow I will celebrate Mass for your liberation." The old man stood up. Padre Pio arose and accompanied him to the door of the friary so that he could leave. He did not realize at that moment that the door was closed and locked. He opened it and bade him farewell. The moon lit up the square, covered with snow. Padre Pio watched the man walk out, and then in the space of 3 steps, the man vanished, not walked away. Vanished! Padre Pio stood there in the doorway. The cold air hit his face. He was taken by a sense of fear. He closed the door, re-entered the guest room, and felt faint. A few days later, Padre Pio told the story to Padre Paolino de Casacalenda, his superior. At first, Padre Paolino was skeptical, but he was also methodical. The two of them decided to go to the town hall in San Giovanni Rotondo, where they looked at the vital statistics for the year 1908. They found the record. On September 18th of that year, one Pietro Di Mauro had in fact died of burns and asphyxiation in room number 4 at the friary, then used as a home for the homeless. The name matched, the date matched, the cause of death matched, the room number matched. Everything the soul had said was true. Padre Pio celebrated the Mass the next morning as promised. He never saw Pietro Di Mauro again, but he saw others, so many others. He once told a bishop, Alberto Costa, who asked him in 1922 if he had ever seen a soul in purgatory, "I have seen so many of them that they do not scare me anymore." The encounters were not always peaceful. One evening, Padre Pio was praying alone in the choir loft. He spotted a young friar at the main altar, apparently dusting and arranging flowers. It was supper time. The chapel should have been empty. Padre Pio called out, "Fra Leone, go to eat. It is not the time to dust and set up the altar." The voice answered, "I am not Fra Leone." Padre Pio froze. The figure at the altar turned to face him. The young friar identified himself as a novice who had done his time of formation there. "For obedience," he said, "I received the task to keep the main altar clean and orderly during my year of probation. Unfortunately, many times I was disrespectful to Jesus in the sacrament by passing in front of the altar without revering the Most Holy One kept in the tabernacle. Now I must serve my purgatory in this very place." The soul asked for a Mass. Padre Pio told him he would have to wait until the morning Mass. The soul cried out, "You are cruel." And then he screamed. The wailing echoed through the empty chapel. And then he disappeared. Padre Pio later said, "That wailing created a wound in my heart that I have felt and shall feel all my life. I, who through divine delegation could have sent that soul immediately to heaven, condemned him to remain another night in the flames of purgatory." The flames. He used that word often. When a friar named Modestino asked him in 1945 to compare a fire on a hearth and the flames of purgatory, Padre Pio answered, "They compare like fresh water and boiling water." These were not gentle encounters. The souls were suffering, real suffering, physical suffering translated into spiritual agony, and the only thing that could lessen their time was prayer, specifically the Mass. Padre Pio once told his doctor, "I am praying for the good death of my great-great-grandfather." The doctor laughed. "But he died more than 100 years ago." Padre Pio looked at him with no humor in his eyes. "Remember that, for God, there is no past and no future. Everything is present. So God made use at that time of the prayers I am saying now. This was not philosophy. This was not metaphor." This was how Padre Pio understood time and eternity. Prayer moved backward. Prayer moved forward. Prayer existed outside the moments we call yesterday and tomorrow, and the souls in purgatory, suspended between earth and heaven, could be reached by those prayers no matter when they had died. Another evening, the friars were all in the dining room. Padre Pio suddenly got up and walked at a steady pace to the door of the convent. He opened it and started having a conversation. 2 friars followed him. They did not see anyone. They did not hear anyone else speaking. They started thinking that something might be wrong with Padre Pio. On the way back to the dining area, Padre Pio explained without being asked, "Don't worry, I was talking to some souls on their way from purgatory to paradise. They came to thank me that I remembered them today in the Mass." The Mass. Always the Mass. That was the currency of purgatory. Not rosaries, not novenas, not hours of private prayer. Those helped, but the Mass was the key. One Mass could liberate a soul who had been waiting for decades. Cleonice Morcaldi, one of Padre Pio's spiritual daughters, said, "There has been no other saint who, every time he was asked, would tell if a soul had been saved, if it had gone to paradise or purgatory, and say the day and hour of the liberation. Padre Pio had exact knowledge, not guesses, not feelings. He knew. When someone asked him about a deceased relative, he would turn away, whisper in a very low voice as if talking to another person, and then turn back and give an answer. The account is settled, or he is safe, now he is in heaven, or he must serve his sentence." Brother Modestino da Pietrelcina, one of Padre Pio's spiritual sons, experienced this firsthand. His father died suddenly on the night of December 30th, 1936. Modestino had recently visited Padre Pio and asked, "Father, when will we see each other again?" Padre Pio had replied, "We will see each other again in the afterlife. Say hello to our country." Modestino was confused. The words were strange. He went back to the convent wondering what Padre Pio had meant. That night, at dawn, his cousin came to call him. His father, at midnight, had tried to get out of bed, eager to get some air, but a stroke had killed him. Modestino went back to San Giovanni Rotondo. Padre Pio welcomed him with affection, gave him condolences, and when asked whether or not his father was in heaven, he replied, "He was the son of guilt. He has to serve his sentence." Modestino understood. Purgatory. He asked, "Father, can I tell my family to have the Gregorian Masses celebrated in his suffrage?" Padre Pio replied, "If your family is in a position to do it, just say it." Modestino went back to Pietrelcina. He offered every step, every effort, every mortification, according to a single intention to support his father's soul. After a few months, Padre Pio called Fra Giovanni Yamarone, Modestino's fellow novice, for an assignment. "Tell Fra Modestino that his father is safe. He was saved by his prayers and his intentions. Now he is in heaven." The speed of liberation varied. Some souls were freed after one Mass. Others needed months, others needed years. One woman, Carmela Marocchino, asked Padre Pio about her brother, Padre Vittore da Canossa, who died suddenly on January 29, 1958. She asked, "Why the sudden death?" Padre Pio replied with gentle words, "Do you know what Jesus did regarding your brother? Jesus went into the garden, and there were many flowers, and one was more beautiful than the others. He leaned on the most beautiful and picked it." The answer was poetic, but it did not satisfy her. She asked again on July 29th, "Is he saved?" Padre Pio's answer was more direct. "My daughter, we priests are more responsible in front of God. Let's continue praying." She asked again on December 29th, 1958, almost a full year after her brother's death. Padre Pio finally told her, he is safe. It had taken 11 months of prayer, 11 months of masses, 11 months of purgatory for a priest who had lived a good life. The standard was high. The purification was real. If you are finding value in this story, take a moment to subscribe. Stories like this take hours of research, and your support keeps this work going. Now back to the soldiers. The encounter in 1944 with the soldiers was not isolated. It was part of a pattern. During World War II, Italy was a battlefield. The region of Puglia, where San Giovanni Rotondo is located, saw constant military activity. American forces were stationed nearby in Foggia, just 8 miles south. Bomber pilots flew missions north to pound Nazi Germany. Soldiers rotated through the area, and some of them Catholic boys from Pennsylvania and Ohio and Missouri heard about the priest with the wounds on his hands. Joe Peluso was one of them. He was from a very small town in Pennsylvania, stationed in Foggia. On October 6, 1944, curiosity got the better of him, and he made the trip to San Giovanni Rotondo with some buddies. They met Padre Pio. They went to his Mass. They watched him suffer through the consecration, tears streaming down his face, completely absorbed in another world. Padre Pio loved the visits of the American soldiers. He greeted them cordially. He gave them advice in simple, childlike words. Sometimes he would pat them on the head in a paternal way and say, "Be a good boy." Joe Peluso visited many times over the next 10 months. He ate with the Capuchins at the monastery. He noticed that Padre Pio simply pushed his food around on the plate while everyone else enjoyed their meal. Padre Pio once said, "I need very little of this world's goods." Before Joe left Italy in July 1945, Padre Pio gave him a message. "Joe, when the war is over and you return to the United States, tell the American people that for those who would like me to be their spiritual father, my answer is yes. I accept all Americans as my spiritual children. I only have 2 requirements: that they lead very good Catholic lives. And please, tell them never to embarrass me in front of Jesus and Mary." Many of those American soldiers never made it home. They died in the skies over Germany. They died in the mountains of Italy. They died in the push north through Europe. And some of them, according to Padre Pio's own testimony, came back to the friary on the night the friars heard voices. Viva Padre Pio. Long live Padre Pio. The voices of the dead, thanking the man who had prayed for them while they were still alive, and whose prayers had followed them into eternity. The encounters with souls were not limited to purgatory. Padre Pio also knew, with precision, the eternal state of those who had died. A widow once came to him in agony. Her husband had ended his own life. She had lived for months with a single question that devoured her peace: what had happened to his soul? When she finally gathered the courage to seek Padre Pio's help, she approached him with tears in her eyes. She asked, almost in a whisper, whether there was any hope that her husband might have been saved. Padre Pio's answer became famous: he is saved. Between the bridge and the river, he repented in the final seconds, in the fall. In the moment before impact, the man had repented, and God, in his mercy, had accepted it. Padre Pio saw this. He knew this. Not because someone told him, not because he guessed. He knew. But not all answers were hopeful. Another woman asked him about her husband, who had also taken his own life. Padre Pio lowered his eyes. His face darkened with sorrow. After a grave silence, he responded quietly, "There is very little hope. Very little. Not none, but very little." The woman felt her heart collapsing under the weight of that answer, But Padre Pio did not offer false comfort. He told the truth as he saw it, even when the truth was unbearable. This was the gift and the burden of Padre Pio. He saw what others could not see. He knew what others could not know, and the souls, both those in purgatory and those who had just died, sought him out. They climbed the mountain road to the friary in greater numbers than the living, who came seeking confession and healing. Another incident involved Padre Giuseppe Antonio da San Marco in Lamis, who was gravely ill in the Foggia convent. On December 29, 1936, Padre Pio was asked by another friar, Padre Giacinto da Sant'Elia a Pianisi, to pray for him because his health was deteriorating. That night, at about 2 o'clock in the morning on December 30th, somebody knocked at Padre Pio's door. Padre Giuseppe entered the room. Padre Pio looked at him in confusion. "How are you doing? They told me that you were gravely ill, and now I see you here." Padre Giuseppe replied, "I am well. All my suffering has ended, and I came to thank you for your prayers." Then he disappeared. In the morning, Padre Pio told Padre Bernardo da Alpicella what had happened. Nobody knew yet that Padre Giuseppe had died. Later they found out that he had died at the exact same time that he had visited Padre Pio. Not hours later, not the day before, the exact moment. The souls did not wait. They crossed over and immediately went to the one person who could help them. And Padre Pio, tired, bleeding from his wounds, exhausted from 12 to 15 hours a day in the confessional, still welcomed them, still spoke to them, still said the Mass that would free them, the confessional. That was where Padre Pio spent most of his life. Not in ecstasy, not in visions, in a wooden box, listening to sins, absolving guilt, guiding souls. From 1918 to 1923, he heard confessions 15 to 19 hours a day, every single day. During the 1940s and 50s, he averaged 8 hours. In 1962 alone, 83,035 women and 19,837 men registered for confession with Padre Pio, an average of 273 people per day. In 1967, he confessed about 15,000 women and 10,000 men, 70 people per day. The average confession lasted only 3 minutes. Over his lifetime, Padre Pio heard approximately 5 million confessions. 5 million. The numbers do not capture the weight. The confessional was not just a sacramental duty for Padre Pio. It was a battlefield. He called it a tribunal. He once said, "It is a tremendous responsibility to sit in the tribunal of the confessional." After a full day of hearing confessions, he would tell the other friars, "Oh, the souls, if you knew how much they cost." Cost. That was the word he used. Not helped, not saved. Cost. The cost was visible. The wounds on his hands bled through the bandages. The pain in his feet made walking almost impossible. The wound in his side throbbed constantly. And beyond the visible stigmata, there were wounds no one could see. The crown of thorns that pressed into his scalp, the scourging on his back, the shoulder wound from carrying the cross, which bled constantly and caused him what he described as indescribable pain. He confided the shoulder wound only to his confessor and to a young Polish priest named Karol Wojtyla, who would later become Pope John Paul II. That wound, Padre Pio said, was by far the most excruciating affliction he endured, more painful than the stigmata in his hands and feet, more painful than the side wound. It never stopped bleeding, it never stopped hurting, and no one knew about it except the 2 men he trusted most. The stigmata itself appeared on September 20th, 1918. Padre Pio was 31 years old. He had just finished celebrating Mass in the choir of the church at San Giovanni Rotondo. He knelt before the crucifix to make his thanksgiving. What happened next, he described in a letter to Padre Benedetto, his spiritual director, dated October 22nd, 1918. "On the morning of the 20th of last month in the choir, after I had celebrated Mass, I saw before me a mysterious person similar to the one I had seen on the evening of the 5th of August. The only difference was that his hands and feet and side were dripping blood. The sight terrified me, and what I felt at that moment is indescribable. I thought I should die, and really should have died if the Lord had not intervened and strengthened my heart, which was about to burst out of my chest. The person disappeared, and I became aware that my hands, feet, and side were pierced and were dripping with blood. He tried to hide the wounds. For 9 days nobody knew. He wrapped his hands in bandages. He wore gloves. He pulled the sleeves of his habit down as far as they would go. He was dying of pain because of the wounds and the resulting embarrassment, he wrote. I am afraid I shall bleed to death if the Lord does not hear my heartfelt supplication to relieve me of this condition. But the Lord did not relieve him. The wounds stayed for 50 years. They bled every single day. They never closed. They never healed. They never became infected. Medical doctors examined them repeatedly and could find no natural explanation. Dr. Luigi Romanelli, the first physician to examine Padre Pio in 1919, wrote in his report, "The wounds are deep, bleeding, without infection or signs of healing. Dr. Amico Bignami, a Roman pathologist, approached the case with skepticism. He suggested autosuggestion or psychological factors. But he could not explain why the wounds continued to bleed without healing or becoming infected. Professor Giorgio Festa, a surgeon, observed the stigmata with scientific rigor and concluded, "This phenomenon cannot be explained by natural laws." In 1921, Bishop Raffaele Rossi of Volterra was sent by the Vatican to secretly investigate Padre Pio. On June 15, 1921, under oath with his hand on the Gospels, Padre Pio answered 142 questions. One of those questions was, "Who gave you the stigmata?" Padre Pio answered, "On September 20th, 1918, I was in the choir of the church after celebrating Mass, making the Thanksgiving when I was suddenly overtaken by powerful trembling, and then there came calm and I saw our Lord in his crucified form. I heard this voice, 'I unite you with my passion.' Once the vision disappeared, I returned to my senses, and I saw these signs here, which were dripping blood. I did not have anything before. Bishop Rossi examined the wounds himself. He wrote in his report, 'The stigmata are there. We are before a real fact. It is impossible to deny. I am fully in favor of their authenticity, and in fact, of their divine origin. The blood had a sweet smell. Multiple witnesses described it as similar to violets, or roses, or perfume that could not be identified. Investigations found nothing in Padre Pio's cell that could produce such a scent, only plain soap. The fragrance came from the blood itself, and it was not constant. It would appear suddenly when people prayed to Padre Pio for help, even when he was not physically present. The wounds bled profusely. Padre Pio wore special gloves with the fingertips cut off so he could handle the host during Mass. He wore special shoes because the wounds in his feet made walking excruciating. He could not close his hands fully. The wounds went straight through from palm to the back of the hand. During Mass, when he elevated the host, blood would drip onto the altar. Witnesses saw it, photographs captured it. And yet, when Padre Pio died on September 23, 1968, 3 days after the 50th anniversary of receiving the stigmata, the wounds had completely disappeared. Doctors examined his body and found no scars, no trace, nothing. 50 years of bleeding, and when death came, the wounds closed and left his body unmarked. This was the man the souls sought, a man marked by Christ. A man who suffered visibly what most people suffer invisibly. A man who had been given the gift or the burden of seeing beyond the veil between life and death. The confessional was where Padre Pio's gift of reading souls became most visible. He did not just hear confessions, he saw them. One woman came to confess and could not speak. She was paralyzed with fear. Padre Pio said to her, "Do you want me to talk for you?" Then he proceeded to tell her word by word everything she had prepared to say. And then he added, "I will be your spiritual father." Another woman approached the confessional thinking about a sin she had committed but had not yet confessed. Before she could say a word, Padre Pio said, "That's okay. Just a few figs." She had eaten several figs the night before and decided to confess it as gluttony but had forgotten to mention it. Padre Pio knew without being told. A professional mathematician came to confession and was vague about how many times he had committed a particular sin. Padre Pio responded firmly, "You are a mathematician. Leave the confessional and come back when you know how many times you did that." One woman had buried a sin in her soul for many years. She never told anyone. She came to Padre Pio and knelt in the confessional. Before she could speak, Padre Pio said, "I hear someone crying. Don't you hear someone crying?" The woman said no. Padre Pio replied, "The cry is from the child you aborted many years ago." The woman sobbed. She confessed. She was forgiven. And she left the confessional completely free of her guilt, at peace with God and at peace with herself. A priest preparing to confess was thinking to himself, "This spiritual life at times is like trying to clutch at straws." He had not said this out loud. He had not written it down. It was a private thought. After the confession, Padre Pio smiled at him and said, "So you think that this spiritual life at times is like trying to clutch at straws?" The priest was stunned. There was no natural explanation. Padre Pio could read thoughts. He could see sins that had been forgotten. He could see sins that had been deliberately hidden. He could see the state of a person's soul the moment they approached him. But he was not cruel. He was firm, sometimes harsh, with those who came without true contrition. He would refuse absolution. He would send people away. "Basta," he would say. "Enough. Leave and come back when you are ready to make a good confession." But with those who came in sincerity, with those who truly wanted to change, he was gentle, paternal, understanding. He once said, "Before reproaching a soul, I suffer it first. But it is not I who act, but he who is in me and above me." The confessional was not just for the living. One evening, Fra Pietro entered his cell at night and saw a young friar sitting at his desk with his head down, as if meditating. Fra Pietro asked who he was, but the friar disappeared. Terrorized, Fra Pietro ran to Padre Pio. Padre Pio accompanied him back to his cell and said calmly, "That young friar is a poor novice who is serving his purgatory in this cell, but don't worry, he will not bother you again, and you will never see him again." Another friar, Padre Francesco Napolitano, reported that in 1945, 2 other friars saw apparitions in the hallway. They were terrified and went to Padre Pio. He told them, "Dad, don't get agitated. Those are 2 poor friars in purgatory. They have to serve their purgatory in the spot where they disobeyed the rule of St. Francis. The souls were everywhere, in the cells, in the hallways, on the road to the friary. Padre Pio could see them, he could speak to them, and he could help them." Once, the friars in the convent of San Giovanni Rotondo heard music one evening, a choir singing. Beautiful voices. Nobody that they knew could be performing at that time of the day. They went to Padre Pio, who was absorbed in prayer, and asked him about it. He looked at them as if the answer was obvious. "So, what? Why are you marveling? Those are the voices of the angels taking the souls from purgatory to paradise. The angels, carrying souls from fire to light, from suffering to joy, from time to eternity." And Padre Pio could hear them, he could see them. He lived on the border between 2 worlds. His understanding of purgatory was not academic, it was experiential. He once told someone, "I suffer like the souls in purgatory. The souls in purgatory do not suffer more than I do. I am sure that I am not wrong on this. This was not an exaggeration." The stigmata alone caused him constant physical pain. The wounds on his hands, his feet, his side bled every day for 50 years, from 1918 until just before his death in 1968. The blood had a sweet smell, which medical examinations could not explain. The wounds never healed, never closed, never stopped bleeding. But the physical pain was only part of it. Padre Pio also suffered spiritually. He endured demonic attacks that left him bruised and bleeding. He suffered the isolation of suspicion and investigation by church authorities who thought he might be a fraud. He suffered the constant weight of knowing the state of souls, seeing their sins, feeling their pain, and yet he never complained. He never refused a soul who asked for help. He never turned away a visitor who climbed the mountain to seek him. And when he died on September 23rd, 1968, thousands lined the streets. They knew what he had done for them. They knew what he had suffered. And they knew that even in death, he would continue to intercede. Years later, in the year 2000, a young boy named Matteo Pio Colella was diagnosed with life-threatening meningitis. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, his condition worsened and he fell into a coma. His family fervently prayed to Padre Pio for his intercession, placing a relic of the saint on Matteo's bedside. During the night, Matteo's parents reported a vivid dream in which Padre Pio appeared and touched their son's forehead. Miraculously, the following morning, Matteo woke up from his coma, completely healed. The doctors were stunned and could not explain the sudden improvement in his health. Medical records and testimonies from the medical team confirmed the inexplicable nature of Matteo's recovery, leading to the attribution of this miraculous healing to Padre Pio. This miracle became one of the key reasons Pope John Paul II canonized Padre Pio on June 16, 2002. The canonization Mass was celebrated at St. Peter's Square in Rome, with an estimated 300,000 people attending the ceremony. But the miracles, the healings, the supernatural gifts were never the point. Padre Pio himself was uncomfortable with the attention. He once asked his friend Pietro Cugino near the end of his life, "Tell me seriously, do you think I will be saved?" He was not sure. Even after 50 years of bearing the wounds of Christ, even after liberating countless souls from purgatory, even after seeing angels and saints and Jesus himself, he still feared for his own salvation. This humility defined him. He never claimed holiness. He never sought fame. He simply did what the souls asked him to do. He prayed. He said the Mass. And he trusted that God would handle the rest. The shrine of St. Padre Pio in San Giovanni Rotondo now receives 8 million pilgrims each year, second only to the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. The little friary that once housed a poorhouse, where Pietro di Mauro died in a fire in 1908, is now a destination for millions seeking healing, confession, and connection to the supernatural. But if you were to ask Padre Pio what mattered most, he would not point to the crowds. He would not point to the miracles. He would point to the Mass, one sacrifice, one offering of Christ's body and blood. That is what freed the souls. That is what opened heaven. And he would tell you what he told so many others. Pray, hope, and do not worry. God is merciful and will hear your prayer. The souls that climbed the mountain road to San Giovanni Rotondo, both living and dead, knew this better than anyone. They came because they knew Padre Pio had access to something they desperately needed. Not his own power, not his own holiness, but his willingness to stand before God and plead on their behalf. The voices in the night in 1944 were not ghosts. They were not hauntings. They were souls who had been liberated. Soldiers who had died in war, boys who had seen hell on earth, who had made it through the fire of purgatory and were now on their way to paradise. And they stopped one last time at the friary to say thank you. Viva Padre Pio. Long live Padre Pio. The door was locked, the courtyard was empty, but the voices were real. And if you listen closely, on certain nights in San Giovanni Rotondo, the locals will tell you they still hear them.